At this point, we're pretty knee-deep into the fantasy football season in 2023. And it's always really interesting to see how different weeks bring on different phases for different people. Week 1, overreaction week. Week 2, that's the week where people start to panic. And week 3, people are getting desperate by this time. If you're 0-3 or 1-2 right now, we need to make some moves to upgrade your roster and get you some W's as soon as possible. And it would be really easy for me to come out here and say, trade the farm for Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill. Yeah, that's a really easy thing for me to say, but that's not actually going to be good for your team. And you're not going to be able to win W's if you sell the farm for just one guy. So today, we're going to look at waiver wire and recently developed players to see if they're really worth acquiring and if they are going to be capable of saving your season for you. And please make sure to go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to this channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and dive into these guys today. So the first guy I want to talk about here is Tutu Atwell of the Los Angeles Rams. So there's been a lot of shockers this year, right? When you think about guys like Devonta Akers, who we'll discuss here in a minute, you think about other guys like Puka Nacua, a teammate of his. To me, Tutu Atwell has actually been the biggest shocker of the league. Because Puka Nacua, rookie wide receiver for the Rams, he's really built like a Cooper Kupp type of wide receiver for them. Guy's a target hog. He doesn't do anything exceptionally well, but he just has great hands and he's reliable. Tutu Atwell is really surprising me because this is his third year in the league now, and he's been such a bust for the Los Angeles Rams basically up until this point. Now, he's the wide receiver 12 in half PPR through 3 weeks. And what makes it even more interesting is he's at that position without being used as a traditional wide receiver. This dude's small. He's 5'9" and 165 pounds, so they don't use him like a traditional wide receiver. He's in on a lot of crossing routes and a lot of gadget type of routes where he's running wheel routes and not directly manned up against an outside corner. But here's the reality right now with Tutu Atwell. This guy's averaging 14.9 fantasy points per game, and you can see his per game stats right now as well on the screen. And if you have that opportunity and he's sitting on your bench, he should not be sitting on your bench if you're 0-3 or 1-2. He simply should not be. And if he's on your waiver wire, he shouldn't be there either. He's 65% rostered, so he's more than half rostered. But if he's out there, I would definitely go up and pick him up right now. Now, the big question mark with him is with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, the return of him, while it is still uncertain when it's going to be, it's definitely a situation where when Cooper Kupp returns, one of these guys can become less relevant. And just because Puka Nacua is a more traditional wide receiver, I would lean on the side of saying that Tutu Atwell is going to be the one who really gets affected negatively from Cooper Kupp's eventual return. And that makes me nervous here. That's the part that makes me nervous. So if you have Tutu Atwell, I would use him right now because you could start picking up some W's with him in your lineup right now. While Cooper Kupp is out, you got to take advantage of that right now. I wouldn't trade for him because of the Cooper Kupp factor. So I would say that his upside level to win a league for you and save your season is pretty low. But in the short term, I definitely see the merit here. Now, our next guy here, as we discussed earlier, we mentioned him earlier, it's Devonta Akers of the Miami Dolphins this year. So obviously, he was the prize waiver wire pickup of the week. Everybody was hyped to get him. I mean, the dude lit fantasy football on fire in week 3. This one's honestly really, really interesting to me. And there's a lot of different reasons it's interesting to me. Miami obviously has, in my opinion, and I think in most of your opinion, the best offense in the league as of right now. Through the first 3 weeks, I don't know how you can argue that there's a better offense right now. This team is so stacked. They're a track team. There's tons of speed everywhere. And Devonta Akers is one of them. And the reality with Miami Dolphins players is anyone who gets real significant playing time in this offense has real fantasy football upside as a result of that. But the big question for me is, what is the future workload like? Because if you go back to just 2 weeks ago, or even 1 week ago, weeks 1 and 2, he had 2 total touches combined in those first 2 weeks. And then he came out and he popped off in week 3. So I did a dynasty rookie draft guide over the summer where I discussed 80 plus players in the 2023 dynasty rookie class. And I went into depth about Devonta Akers, and while I'm not going to review everything I said about him, I did note that he's a very small player. 5'8", 188 pounds. The talent was never the question for Devonta Akers. It's 100% related to his durability, which, by the way, just earlier in this preseason, injured his shoulder. Is it because he's small? I definitely think it has something to do with it. And obviously, like I said, the workload concerns, because it's not just the fact that they didn't start using him until week 3, it's also due to the result of Raheem Mostert being there. Raheem Mostert, by the way, running back 1 in fantasy football right now in half PPR. So I don't think he's going away. And while I do think the upside is actually pretty high, that Devonta Akers could be a big factor in saving your season, I wouldn't trade for him right now, though. I really, really wouldn't. I think that his value, just based on a week 3 performance of that magnitude, is super inflated right now. I don't think his value is stable right now. And I understand this. I understand that if you're 0-3 or 1-2, you don't feel like time is on your side right now. I totally get the urgency to want to make a move. But if you're looking to get Devonta Akers, I would hold out for another week or two to really see where his true value is, because I have a feeling that he's going to go down in value, and there's no way that he's going to score another 50-point game. So his value will drop and stabilize, and then you could get a better idea of what he's really worth, rather than overpaying for a Josh Jacobs to get Devonta Akers. Now, moving on to number 3, our next guy on here is Marvin Mims Jr. of the Denver Broncos here. Now, this one is crazy because obviously Denver just got spanked by the Dolphins this past week. It was one of the most embarrassing losses I've seen in the NFL in a long, long time. Now, what I've been saying is that Marvin Mims has been a lone bright spot on this team. He's a rookie, and he's also the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football on that Denver Broncos team. He's the wide receiver 25 in half PPR right now. Now, for weeks now, I've been discussing Marvin Mims as a good waiver wire add. And not just because the short-term value is there, which, by the way, he does have short-term value, but I think the longer term is what I've been saying, and I still truly do believe that he has long-term value. While the upside is there, the volume is not. And that's the honest part we need to get to. He's got 9 targets through 3 weeks, an average of 3 targets per game. That's not nearly enough to trust on a weekly basis as of right now. Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, they're both getting more work than Marvin Mims for sure. That's not the reality. The reality is not that he's the wide receiver 1 in this actual offense. The reality is the big playability is there. You think about being the wide receiver 25 with 9 targets, that means your upside is sky high. That means you're a deep threat and you can make a lot of plays. Now, again, you don't really want to start Marvin Mims week to week. And really, he's a better play in a best ball format where you don't have to make a start-sit decision with him. But if you're 0-3 or 1-2, you probably need to just try some things out and shoot for upside. And while the upside I don't love quite as much as like a Devonta Akers type, there is definitely a chance that he is going to be a legitimate contender for you when it really, really matters. And the beauty about this is he's only 12% rostered still. You got to pick this guy up. Make some room for him because the guy is an ascending asset. And honestly, I think he could start having some pretty consistent weeks here. Number 4 is my personal favorite on the list, and we discussed him on Monday in the waiver wire video. It's Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. Now, in that Monday video, I discussed why I believe that he was the true best waiver wire pickup in that waiver wire week. This is the guy that I'm excited about. Now, like I said, with Devonta Akers, I did my 2023 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, and in that draft guide, I discussed my similar concerns with Tank Dell as well. The dude is a shrimp. 5'8", 165 pounds. I had lots of concerns with him, but I also knew that he was a baller. And here's the thing. CJ Stroud handpicked this guy in the 3rd round for the Houston Texans, and he's been really, really good so far. I mean, not only is he a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football right now, he's averaging 7 targets per game, and he's got 2 touchdowns through the first 3 weeks. So not only, unlike Marvin Mims, does he have the big play upside, but the volume is also there, and the volume is going to determine how consistent he will be in fantasy football week to week. And here's the thing about the Texans. I've been saying this for weeks now, that I think that Houston's defense is going to continuously improve during the season. What I did not say and did not predict was that Houston's offense would actually start really get rolling this early in the season. I mean, CJ Stroud has really evolved over the first couple of weeks in the NFL. It's been shocking to see how good this offense is getting and how fast it's happening. They're not some top-tier offense yet, and I don't think they will be at any point, but they're way better than they were last year, and that gives Tank Dell stable upside in fantasy football. I have it in the thumbnail of this video. I would trade Garrett Wilson for Tank Dell, or better yet, get a package together going where you can get another high upside guy in return as well. Because the reality is, Tank Dell is still an unknown player. A lot of people don't know who the guy is. So you can get away with selling off a big name guy like Garrett Wilson and getting more value in return for him. I think Tank is the most sustainable guy among this group right here. I think he has the best chance of providing short-term and long-term value in fantasy football. The upside is high here. And the last guy we're talking about is Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. So Jerome Ford, just 2 weeks ago, after week 2, he was the prize waiver wire pickup in that week's class. So I get why. Like, it makes sense why he is, because the guy is running behind a great offensive line. The Browns have a great offensive line, although they did lose Jack Conklin, their starting tackle, for the rest of the season. They're still a very good offensive line, and he provided a great fill-in slot for week 2 fantasy football when Nick Chubb got out in the second quarter. So the thing about Jerome Ford is he's got guaranteed running back 1 volume unless he gets injured. That's the only way that Jerome Ford will not see running back 1 volume for the rest of the season. The upside from a volume perspective and just from a playmaking perspective certainly seems to be there. Now, what I mentioned last week about Jerome Ford was that he would struggle in the future, specifically last week. Now, while he did record 2 touchdowns in week 3, and he ended up being a good fantasy play for you, the dude averaged less than 2 yards a carry. It's not very good. I mean, that's a bad sign, man. And my point is not to say that Jerome Ford sucks, but I see a backup running back who's not elite. And that's the reality of the situation. So while he does have mid-level upside because he obviously has produced for you in fantasy football and he's behind a great offensive line, while he does have mid-level upside, I wouldn't trade for him right now either, because very similarly to A-Chain, I think that his value is too inflated. The guy I'm going after out of all these guys is Tank Dell. I think he's got the best shot to save your season for you. And while these other guys do have their moments, and I do think will help you in the short term, I don't know their long-term upside as confidently as I do with Tank Dell. So let me know what you think of these guys in the comments below and what questions you need answered for week 4 fantasy football, and I'll answer as many as I possibly can. And if you want to see the top 30 running back rankings for week 4 fantasy football, click on this video right here.